How will we address the climate crisis? Climate One with Greg Dalton brings together advocates, influencers, and policymakers in empowering conversations that connect all aspects of the climate emergency, the individual and the systemic, the scary and the exciting, to help you understand the most critical issue of our time. Because addressing the climate crisis begins by talking about it.
The fossil fuel industry has known for decades that using their products destabilizes the global climate. Last fall, California Attorney General Rob Bonta filed a lawsuit against 5 of the world's largest oil and gas companies, along with the lobbying organization, the American Petroleum Institute. The suit argues that the industry knowingly hid the facts from the public. California is the world's 5th largest economy and a major oil producer. How big could this lawsuit be? California Attorney General Rob Bonta, today on Climate One.
You filed the civil lawsuit that alleges ExxonMobil, Shell, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, BP, and importantly, the American Petroleum Institute have known since the 1960s. I actually think there's evidence they knew in the 50s,
right,
that burning fossil fuels could warm the planet. Then instead of alerting the public, they chose to downplay or outright deny the effects. Can you give us an overview of the suit and what it alleges?
Absolutely, and wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me. The short of it is that these fossil fuel companies and the API, the American Petroleum Institute, they knew about global warming and predicted with terrifying accuracy where we would be today with extreme weather and global warming and climate change, and they lied about it. It was bad for business. They knew internally, they acknowledged internally with memos and conversations the truth of climate change, but externally to the public, to the world, they lied. And they denied climate change. And they didn't just fail to talk about it. They had a very sophisticated, strategic public relations approach to how they denied it. They hired a firm, and they created front groups, and they placed and planted op-eds, all saying the opposite of what they internally acknowledged. And so this is a climate change deception case. We have filed it in San Francisco Superior Court. We are the biggest geographic entity and biggest economy to sue these fossil fuel companies for this conduct. We think it's a game changer. We think it's a massive transformational moment in terms of accountability. And we believe in a simple premise. One, you shouldn't lie to the people of this state, of this country, of this world. And 2, you should be held accountable and pay for the damage that you created because of that deception and because of those lies. So a cornerstone of our case is our public nuisance claim, which has a remedy of an abatement fund, a fund to pay for mitigation and abatement to address climate change repercussions that have harmed so many of us. Of course, now we know we're seeing droughts and floods and wildfires and superstorms, and homes are being washed away or burned, and farms are being impacted, our infrastructure, our roads.
Can I just jump in there, though? You know, public nuisance sounds like, noisy neighbors next door and dog poo on the sidewalk. It doesn't sound like a serious thing. Nuisance doesn't sound like the serious thing, but that's, so what is it about nuisance as a legal term? Because nuisance sounds like, you're a pain, but, it's not a big deal.
It's very serious, and it's been applied in major actions like this in the past. So it is essentially a harm to a community or a neighborhood that's been created by a single entity. That is exactly what's happening here with fossil fuel companies creating harm to all of Californians and beyond. And it's not an unprecedented novel approach. It's been used with tobacco. It's been used with opioids. It's been used with lead paint. Other entities, big corporate entities that have harmed people with a product that they knew was harming them, and continue to perpetuate it and push it out into the marketplace anyway. So it's a tried and true approach, and the abatement fund could be seeded with billions of dollars from the fossil fuel industry.
Okay, and we'll get into that later. So it's nuisance is more serious, in a legal term than it means to kind of the average person. There's also fraudulent, you're claiming business practices, damage to natural resources, and product liability. So this seems like you're actually going after throwing a lot of different things to see what sticks.
That's it. There's 4 buckets of legal claims. There's the public nuisance claim. There's a series of claims around fraud and deception and false advertising. There's a failure to warn products liability bucket of claims. And then the 4th is a special cause of action that is unique only to the Attorney General of the state of California to be able to protect our natural resources when they're harmed by an entity. So 4 buckets, the most broad sweeping set of claims ever in this space, again, brought by the largest geographic entity and economy.
Right, and we'll get to some other states are doing this as well. But first, the key really is, back to that phrase from the Nixon era is what did they know and when did they know it? In 1991, Shell produced a video called The Climate of Concern that lays out quite accurately, I think this is more than 30 years ago, what they knew, how they knew it, and the science that was going on. It's quite a remarkable video that shows, again, this is from Shell Oil, produced this video. Let's hear a clip.
These models contain many uncertainties, but they forecast that by 2050, global mean temperature could have increased by at least 1.5 degrees, possibly near 4.
Snow melt there.
This may not sound much, but what the computer modelers are looking at is the possibility of change at a rate faster than at any time since the end of the Ice Age. No 2 scenarios fully agree. But their strange, mesmerizing images of possible futures have each prompted the same serious warning. A warning endorsed by a uniquely broad consensus of scientists in their report to the United Nations at the end of 1990.
So that's a 1991 video from Shell Oil saying, it's happening, we know it, it's science, humans are causing it, it's bad. Your reaction, have you seen that before?
I haven't seen that video clip, but not shocking and very consistent with the evidence that we have set forth in our complaint. Our complaint's very thorough, over 135 pages. There's a set of 15 to 20 pages which lay out in excruciating detail that will make your blood boil, the facts dating back from the 50s, 60s about what the fossil fuel companies that are defense in the case, what they knew, when they knew it, how they acknowledged it, citations and quotes to internal memos, to internal discussions, and then what they did instead to lie to the people, to bypass clean energy pathways and opportunities for carbon capture and development of other technologies in pursuit of billions of dollars in profits. And their business model has been very successful. They have captured billions of dollars in profits while socializing the costs to the people of California, America, and the world.
And we've seen this before. A lot of this follows on the tobacco playbook with, delay, deny, et cetera. Or they go from deny to delay to deflect. There's lots of D words that come up here. And then in 1998, Big Tobacco agreed to a grand bargain and pay more than $200 billion over 25 years. It's known as a master settlement. Complicated, but there's similarities. Lots of states, and then they eventually rolls up into one big settlement. This happens in asbestos and other things. How relevant is the tobacco precedent for what you're trying to do on oil?
Very relevant, and we can't talk about our lawsuit without talking about tobacco, without talking about opioids, without talking about lead paint. And the similarities with tobacco are striking. The use of front groups, the use of strategic public relations.
Some of the very same lawyers.
The same ones. It's the same playbook. It's an off-the-shelf playbook used by corporations when they know about a fact that is very problematic to their business model, that they know that they're hurting people, and if people knew that, they would make different decisions, so they set about to lie. Merchants of doubt, undermining the science, and providing studies that they commission and op-eds that they place in key newspapers to suggest an alternative reality than the truth that they acknowledge.
Influencing elite universities with research funding,
by paying for the funding. So paying for their own studies. They don't like the actual facts, they pay for alternative facts. And it's wrong. And the pathway that tobacco took, where multiple entities worked together, teamed up, applied aggregated pressure over time and across geographic spaces. We're in the middle of that process now, I believe. Our entry, I think, opens up the floodgates for others to join. And if other states who are invited to join and other entities who are invited to join add their voice, then I think we get into the same place as we were with tobacco.
But there's a big difference between tobacco and oil, is that a lot of people never smoked, right? And everybody uses fossil fuels. I've owned an electric car for more than a decade. I still use fossil fuels. I still fly, so tobacco and oil are different in terms of, the economy runs on oil in a way that it never ran on tobacco. And we're complicit. You and I are both complicit. So how do you get to that?
I mean, it's not about who's using fossil fuels. Like you said, it's universal, it's ubiquitous. And that's part of the lie here, is to tell people it's okay to use fossil fuel because climate change is not real. It's not really happening. Or it's not happening as quickly, or it's not as urgent. Or we are now, today's greenwashing lies, our fossil fuel is actually clean energy. Natural gas is clean energy. Or we're in the middle of a massive transformation into clean energy futures when only 1% or less of their investments are actually in clean energy, and 99% remains with fossil fuels. So we are the state of California suing. California is a fossil fuel producing state. We're the home of Chevron. And both things can be true at once, that you can hold fossil fuel companies accountable for their conduct, for their lies, for the damage that they visited on the people of the state and this nation, and acknowledge the truth that got us here, which is that fossil fuels are ubiquitously used.
There's a difference also in the mechanism of harm. When I smoke a cigarette, smoke goes into my lungs, it causes cancer, right? We burn fossil fuels, it goes up in the sky, something happens, it comes down, and suddenly the San Mateo coast is eroding, and we have droughts, and so it's a little harder to, how do you know that this company or this refinery caused this flood or this damage, therefore to assign damage in a court case?
Yeah, that'll be part of what we have experts to talk about, the depth and the exact scope of the damage, the causation that exists. There is no doubting climate science and climate change, although the whole business model of the fossil fuel companies has been to doubt it. If you believe in facts, evidence, science, and data, you can't doubt it. And so that will be a part of the discussion, how much each entity pays into the abatement fund, how much Chevron is responsible, and how much Shell is responsible. I'm happy to have them pointing the finger at one another to talk about who's more responsible than the other. But the damage in aggregate will be clear. The impact on Californians. We have data that shows the impacts of wildfires, the impacts of floods, the impacts of superstorms. It is knowable, and so we will present that to a court and make our case.
And you've worked on environmental justice. What about communities that have been most harmed? Because we have 5 refineries here in the East Bay. They're concentrated in a certain area. It is downwind from Pacific Heights and Marin. It is in certain communities. What about those communities that have been frontline and harmed most by fossil fuels?
Absolutely. The communities that are hurt first and worst, that are under-resourced and overburdened, that live at the intersection of poverty and pollution, are top priority for relief and for support. It's an appropriate allocation of resources to help those harmed the most and who have the least ability to respond and provide them substantial resources up front.
By one count, there are more than 30 cases against oil companies filed by states, cities, jurisdictions, and tribal nations. As you said, there's been a lot of procedural, try to slow it down. Massachusetts and the city of Honolulu have moved past a lot of those motions, and they're for dismissal, and reached pre-trial discovery phase. Now, this is where things get interesting, because this is when boxes of documents start to show up and emails get revealed. So what are you looking for in discovery? Because these are the sort of, when the so-called smoking guns come out and things get really interesting.
Yeah, it's exciting. And that there's 30. I think you'll see double, triple, quadruple that in terms of entities that sue as they learn more about the case and they see the momentum that we're building, and they see that you can get to the substance and hold accountable these fossil fuel companies. I'll say first that when we sue, we feel we will win in court at the time of suit. that we've done our due diligence, we've done our investigation, we've developed the factual case and bases for our claims, and we feel we could go to trial very soon, that we don't need discovery to prevail. Discovery is another way to build on our causes of action, maybe identify other causes of action and amend the complaint to add belt and suspenders to the facts that we already have. So we're looking for more smoking guns, and I say more deliberately. We have smoking guns. We have those memos that show that in the 50s and 60s, these fossil fuel companies are acknowledging the future of climate change and extreme weather and global warming. They knew then where we would be today, and they said it, and we have documents that prove it. So are there more documents? Is there additional indication of that theme of knowing about climate change and lying? Surely there's more, and we expect to find some of those documents in discovery, and what becomes available in other cases, to the extent it's not confidential and it's public, becomes evidence in other cases.
Though, sometimes in the American system, a lot of the most egregious transgressions are legal. A lot of what happened in the great financial crisis of 2009 was legal, right? So proving lying is one thing. The part for me that were the strongest case, which, the biggest obstruction, again, may not be legal, is policy obstruction. I talked to one lawyer for Chevron who said, look, this should not be in the courts. Congress should address climate change. It's too technical for the courts. And I said, I agree with you, and if that's the case, you really believe that, then the American Petroleum Institute, which you're a member of, should stop trying to smear electric cars and slow down progress and all these sorts of things. So isn't it possible that what they did is part of our system to slow down policy that's not in their interest? That's legal. That's okay by our system. It's not illegal, right?
Oh, no. I mean, the fossil fuel companies are allowed to make their comments known to policymakers, to lobby them, to petition their government for the positions that they want. That is completely separate from this lawsuit. The fossil fuel companies want, and shared with you exactly what they've been sharing since day one. They want you and others to wrongly believe that this lawsuit has something to do with policy. It doesn't. This is a lawsuit based on a cause of action and a legal claim and the facts that support it that lead to a remedy.
If I had a magic wand and I said, you're CEO today, right now, for 24 hours of a major oil company, what would you do? What do you think the limitations on your power would be? If you're CEO, what should the CEO of Exxon do, or any of these oil companies?
If I was a CEO, I would say we're an energy company, and energy can be created in ways that preserve our planet and ways that destroy our planet. And we should embrace the pathway that preserves our planet, protects it, and move away from fossil fuel and into clean energy, and be an extremely successful billion-dollar clean energy, sustainable energy, green energy company to provide energy for California, the United States, and the world.
BP tried that. Became Beyond Petroleum, right? And Lord Brown, who I've actually sat with here on this stage, and you could say that they were flawed in their implementation. And part of the problem was that Wall Street, dirty still makes more money than clean, because dirty doesn't pay the full price of the pollution that they socialize and put into the atmosphere we're using as an unpriced sewer. So CEO Rob Bonta, you could say that, and I'm Wall Street, and I'm like, because you're not going to make as much money. So the system traps these individuals. So don't we need to change the system? Because it's really the financial model that, any company that wants to kind of do more renewables, it's hard for them because of the economics of the system. It's bigger than as big and powerful these companies are, they're still in an even larger system.
The system is changing as we speak, under our feet. It is becoming more expensive to be dirty than clean. Mm-hmm. This abatement fund remedy is billions of dollars to the bottom line of fossil fuel companies. That's a cost. That's a cost they have to report. They have to share with their shareholders. The divestment of pension funds and others are costs. There are subsidies for investments in clean energy and green energy. So the economic point is an important one. I think that is becoming less imbalanced over time. But there's also just a corporate responsibility. Do you want a planet for your kids and grandkids? for your workers, kids, and grandkids? Do you want to be part of the thing that ended our planet and our future, or did you transform and change and embrace a clean energy future?
As you mentioned, California is an oil state, produces more oil than many people realize in the Central Valley. How about the workers? There's a transition for them. Sometimes they hear these conversations like, you think I'm bad. You think I'm a bad person because I work in oil, right? And this happens, so what do you say to the rank and file workers, who feel, wait, you're trying to sue my company and put me out of business? I'm out of a job.
The workers are absolutely critical, and solving that piece of the puzzle, critical. Often referred to generally as the just transition. I don't think anyone who works in oil is bad. I don't pass any judgment on anyone who wants to work and support their family. Many are getting good jobs in the fossil fuel industry, and they deserve good jobs in the clean energy.
Union jobs, well-paying, a lot better than the clean energy jobs are not union and don't pay so well.
No doubt about the fact that the fossil fuel jobs are often union and well paid with benefits and health care. We need to make sure that those jobs, that there's no loss, that everyone is continued to be made whole as the transition occurs. That could look like a number of different things. The most important thing is that we don't talk about it, we do it. That there are good jobs in wind energy, and that you get the same health care and benefits and pay and union protections, and then in solar or whatever else it is that we pursue in clean energy. It might mean that there needs to be some government subsidies to protect and support workers, to make sure that none of them are treated less than they are now in fossil fuel when they take a job in clean energy. Some folks, who may not have a lot of career left and for whom retraining might not be appropriate, maybe they just get a massive payout. That could be a wise investment in our future by government to be part of the solution and to support it with subsidies.
And one thing I'm keen on is geothermal, because geothermal is actually, we have a fair amount of geothermal in this state, and that's actually a place where oil and gas skills are transferable. And there are people, we've interviewed people who've gone from oil and gas to geothermal, and that's actually a very real pathway, maybe more for individuals than for companies. Your mother helped organize Filipino and Mexican American farm workers for United Farm Workers. How does that influence your work on environmental justice?
Well, one, to the last question we had, it makes me very sensitive to and supportive of workers, to make sure that they are treated with dignity and respect, are supported and valued and seen throughout this whole process. That's item number one. Item number two is, my parent. I grew up in La Paz in the headquarters of the United Farm Workers of America. My dad worked in the front office with Cesar Chavez, my mom in the preschool with Dolores Huerta. We were there in the early 70s. We lived in a trailer. My parents got paid $5 a week for their work with the United Farm Workers, and some of their work involved things that we might call environmental injustice today. The fact that there were workers working in extreme heat, or with exposure to pesticides, or without getting access to water breaks. That was environmental justice before it was environmental justice. And making sure that those disadvantaged communities, the communities that are, as I mentioned before, under-resourced, overburdened, living in communities where there's massive impact, of the pesticides and the challenges, that helped me become sensitive to and excited and passionate about doing climate action and making sure that we have justice as we pursue climate action that preserves our planet, and making sure that we always look through that equity lens and support our disadvantaged communities who are hurt first and worst.
So looking ahead, there's a possible change in administration. You will be the person that will defend California's waiver under the Clean Air Act to have stricter pollution laws, because our air here is so bad in the LA Basin and the Central Valley. What are you anticipating for a possible situation where usually California is kind of aligned with the feds, or sometimes they're like this, and we go like this, and we go like this, back and forth.
Yeah.
We may be entering in a period where the waiver is going to be rescinded, which a lot of California's climate policy rests on our ability to have stricter standards here.
Yep.
What are you worried about looking ahead in November?
Let me first say that, with the Biden administration, I'm super supportive of the Biden administration generally. We're talking about environment, so supportive of the great work that they've done to move away from the Trump era rules and lean into climate action that helps address our climate change problems. And as friends, it's sometimes important for friends to push friends to do more. California is always the most aggressive, on the leading edge, doing the most on the front foot, and we want to push other states to do something similar, our federal government to do the same, and other nations around the world. So that has always been our mantra. It's part of our legacy in addressing climate change, protecting our natural resources. Of course, we have to be prepared for an alternative, and I guess fortunately and unfortunately, we had 4 years to see what that could look like in an iteration, not the only iteration. It could be worse, it could be different in a Trump 2.0 administration, should that come to pass. But California and my office sued under my predecessor, the Trump administration, over 100 times for a lot of issues that that were high profile, like the Affordable Care Act, like DACA and immigration policy. But the majority of those 100+ lawsuits were environmental, and holding the Trump administration to account when they moved beyond their regulatory or executive authority, violated federal law, or infringed upon other legal jurisdictions, including our own. So we are prepared to do the same. We need to continue to lead this nation and this world, and if the Trump administration comes to pass and becomes an impediment and a challenge, we will stand up tall and strong and continue our pathway forward, including getting our waivers so that we can be even more aggressive than the rest of the nation when it comes to vehicle emission standards and other things.
And we are out of time. Let's give our thanks to Attorney General Rob Bonta for joining us today.